What if one of Scripture's earliest wilderness encounters with God belonged to a forgotten woman? We all know the story of Moses meeting God in the wilderness. But before Moses received the Ten Commandments, before the burning bush, before the Exodus, another person encountered the divine in a desolate place, and she gave God a name. Her name was Hagar. We often remember Hagar as a footnote, a minor character in the story of Abraham and Sarah, or Abram and Sarai, as they were originally known. But her story is far more than just a prelude to the birth of Isaac. It's a powerful testament to God's unwavering care for the marginalized and overlooked. This is the story of Hagar, the abandoned servant who encountered God in the wilderness and gave him a name, El Roi, the God who sees. To understand Hagar's story, we have to travel back nearly 4,000 years to the ancient Near East. Abram and Sarai were prominent figures in their community, blessed with wealth, possessions, and influence. They were like the power couple of their time, respected and admired. They lived in a world of tents and flocks, moving from place to place as nomadic herders, but their influence extended far beyond their immediate surroundings. They had everything, it seemed, except the one thing that truly mattered in their culture. They desperately lacked a child. In that time and place, bearing children was paramount, especially for women. It wasn't just a personal desire, it was a social and cultural imperative. A woman's worth was often tied to her ability to produce an heir, securing the family's lineage and inheritance. Without children, a woman's status was diminished, her future uncertain. Sarai was barren, and the weight of this childlessness pressed heavily upon her. Imagine the whispers, the pitying glances, the constant reminder of her failure to fulfill her primary role. The shame of infertility in that culture was a heavy burden for any woman to bear, a weight that could crush her spirit and isolate her from her community. And in the ancient Near East, there was an accepted solution to this problem, a way to circumvent the natural limitations of the human body, a culturally sanctioned workaround for infertility. The practice of surrogacy, while not identical to modern methods, was a common way for a childless couple to have an heir. According to the customs of the time, codified in some ancient legal texts, a wife could offer her female servant to her husband, and any child born from that union would be considered the wife's offspring, legally recognized as the heir. It wasn't ideal, but it was a way to preserve the family line and maintain social standing. It seems strange to us now, but this was a pragmatic solution in a world where lineage and legacy were everything. A world where the future depended on having descendants. And this is where Hagar enters the story. She was Sarai's Egyptian servant, a woman far from her home, likely taken as a spoil of war. We don't know the exact circumstances of her enslavement, but it's likely she was captured during one of the many conflicts that plagued the ancient world. As a slave, she had little to no agency of her own. Her life was dictated by the whims of her mistress, Sarai, and her master, Abram. She was a possession, a piece of property in a world where women already had limited rights. She was at the bottom of the social hierarchy, with no voice and no power. Think for a moment, what was it like for Hagar to live in a foreign land, serving people who did not share her language, her customs, or her gods? What dreams did she have for her future? How did she feel knowing that her body could be used to solve Sarai's problem? Imagine the fear, the uncertainty, the sense of being utterly alone in a world that didn't care about her. Sarai saw Hagar as a means to an end, a vessel to carry on Abram's lineage. Perhaps she convinced herself that she was doing Hagar a favor, giving her a purpose and a place in their household. But the reality was that Hagar had no choice in the matter. She was a tool to be used, her own desires and feelings completely disregarded. The Bible says Sarai took Hagar, her Egyptian maid, and gave her to her husband Abram to be his wife. And Abram, perhaps swayed by Sarai's desperation and the cultural norms of the time, agreed to this arrangement. It was a decision that would have profound and lasting consequences for everyone involved. But to understand why this decision will change everything, we have to understand the desperate world Sarai and Hagar were trapped inside. The decision had been made. Hagar would bear Abram's child, and almost immediately everything shifted. Genesis 16:4 tells us simply, "And he went in unto Hagar, and she conceived." It's a brief, almost clinical statement, but packed within it is an explosion of social and emotional consequences. Hagar, the powerless servant, was now carrying the heir of Abram's vast estate. Think about it. Overnight, her status had been radically altered. She was no longer just a piece of property. She was the vessel of promise, the bearer of hope for Abram's lineage. The seed of Abram had taken root in her womb. In a culture where lineage was everything, this was a seismic shift. She held a position of unique importance, a power she never asked for, a power thrust upon her by circumstance and desperation. This elevation, however, did not come without its own set of problems. The same verse continues, "And when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was despised in her eyes." The King James Version says Hagar looked upon her mistress with contempt. Other translations use words like scorn or disdain. Can you imagine the complex emotions swirling within Hagar? She was, after all, still a slave. But now she carried something Sarai desperately wanted but could not obtain on her own. This created an immediate power imbalance. She had something Sarai needed. She was carrying Abram's son. Sarai could only claim him by law, not by birth. And it's important to remember this wasn't just about personal feelings. It was about social standing, about fulfilling a cultural expectation. Hagar, through no choice of her own, was now in a position to fulfill that expectation, while Sarai remained barren and, in the eyes of her society, less valuable. In a world obsessed with male heirs, Hagar carried the future of Abram's house inside her. Now, societal norms would have dictated a very specific set of behaviors in this situation. Hagar, despite carrying Abram's child, was still expected to show deference and respect to Sarai. She was still Sarai's servant. However, the reality was far more complicated. The unspoken tension must have been palpable. Every interaction, every glance, every word would have been weighed down by the heavy knowledge of their changed relationship. Imagine the scene in their tent. Sarai, carefully watching Hagar's every move, listening for any hint of arrogance in her voice. Hagar, trying to navigate this new reality, acutely aware of the power she now held, yet still bound by the chains of servitude. It is almost impossible for us, generations removed from this reality, to really grasp the daily emotional calculations between them. Did Hagar flaunt her pregnancy, either intentionally or unintentionally? Did she carry herself with a new sense of pride, perhaps even a subconscious desire to assert her newfound importance? Was there resentment? Probably. The text doesn't tell us directly, but the implications are clear. Pregnancy often brings a visible change, a radiance, and that natural glow must have been a painful reminder to Sarai. And what about Sarai? The Bible doesn't explicitly describe her feelings at this point, but we can only imagine the maelstrom of emotions churning within her. She had orchestrated this arrangement, driven by her desire for an heir. But now, faced with the reality of Hagar's pregnancy, she was confronted with a painful truth. She wasn't the one carrying Abram's child. Her own body had failed her. She may have started to think about all the years of disappointment, the private tears, the public shame. Think about the humiliation, the anger, the sense of powerlessness she must have felt. Sarai was a woman of wealth and influence, accustomed to being in control. Now she was dependent on her slave girl to fulfill her most basic desire. Hagar's womb, once a tool for Sarai, had become a source of immense pain and resentment. The situation was ripe for conflict. This was not the outcome she envisioned when she offered Hagar to Abram. Sarai, trapped in a prison of her own making, felt the walls closing in. The text is quiet here, but the silence is not empty. It is filled with unspoken resentments, simmering tensions, and the weight of societal expectations. It's a silence that speaks volumes about the complexities of human relationships, the pain of infertility, and the destructive power of jealousy. What emotions are swirling unspoken? What small daily gestures betrayed the growing chasm between these two women? Sarai's initial desperation for an heir had now morphed into bitterness. The promise of a child had become a source of resentment. The power dynamics within the household were irrevocably altered, and the fragile balance that had once existed was now teetering on the brink of collapse. Hagar's rise in status, coupled with Sarai's feelings of humiliation, created a toxic environment, a breeding ground for conflict. The surrogacy that was supposed to cement Sarai's legacy became a daily reminder of what she lacked. And for Hagar, what began as obedience became a source of dangerous pride. The two women were locked in a silent, escalating battle with no easy resolution. The joy that should have accompanied the promise of new life was overshadowed by the darkness of jealousy and resentment. The consequences of this decision loomed, heavy and unavoidable. Abram, who had passively agreed to Sarai's plan, likely underestimated the depth of the emotional turmoil it would unleash. He wanted an heir, but at what cost? What happened next reveals the complex web of power, shame, and desperation that was about to shatter this household. Abram, caught in the middle of this escalating conflict, faced a difficult decision. Sarai, his wife, the woman he loved, came to him with a complaint, her voice laced with anger and resentment. "My wrong be upon you," she declared, placing the blame squarely on his shoulders. She accused him of being responsible for Hagar's contempt, suggesting that he had somehow enabled or encouraged her behavior. "I gave my maid into your bosom," she continued, "and when she saw that she had conceived, I was despised in her eyes." It was a raw and honest expression of her wounded pride and the powerlessness she felt. She had initiated this whole plan, and now it had backfired spectacularly. But the real sting in her accusation was next. "The Lord judge between you and me." Sarai invoked divine judgment, essentially accusing Abram of failing to protect her honor and status. It was a desperate plea from a woman pushed to the edge, feeling betrayed not just by Hagar, but by her own husband. Abram's response, however, reveals his passivity in this complex situation. Instead of defending Hagar, or even acknowledging Sarai's pain, he essentially washed his hands of the whole affair. He told Sarai, "Behold, your maid is in your hand. Do to her as it pleases you." Think about what he was saying. He was essentially giving Sarai free rein to treat Hagar as she saw fit. He abdicated his responsibility to protect Hagar, a vulnerable woman under his care, and placed her back under Sarai's complete control. It was a decision that prioritized domestic peace over justice, a choice that would have devastating consequences. He wanted an heir, yes, But he was unwilling or unable to manage the fallout of his own decision, refusing to play referee but instead punting the responsibility completely. This decision highlights the power dynamics at play within the household. Abram, as the patriarch, held ultimate authority, but in this instance, he chose to defer to Sarai, perhaps out of a desire to appease her, perhaps out of a lack of understanding of the situation's gravity. Regardless, his inaction perpetuated the cycle of abuse, and the fragile household Sarai sought to build began to fracture. Sarai, now empowered by Abram's permission, unleashed her pent-up anger and frustration on Hagar. The Bible tells us simply, Sarai dealt harshly with her. The Hebrew phrase used here suggests a pattern of mistreatment, abuse that went beyond simple discipline. We can only imagine the ways in which Sarai tormented Hagar: verbal abuse, physical labor, deprivation of food and water, constant humiliation. Hagar, already vulnerable as a slave and a pregnant woman, now faced the full force of Sarai's wrath. She had no one to turn to, no one to protect her. Abram, the man who should have been her protector, had abandoned her to Sarai's cruelty. The power imbalance between Sarai and Hagar had reached its breaking point. Sarai had the authority, the social standing, and now, Abram's explicit permission to do as she pleased. Hagar, on the other hand, was utterly defenseless. She was a slave, an outsider, a woman alone in a foreign land. She was carrying Abram's child, but that provided her no protection. In fact, it made her an even greater target for Sarai's jealousy, twisting her role as the surrogate into a burden. The situation had become unbearable. Hagar, facing daily abuse and with no hope of escape, reached her breaking point. Desperate and afraid, she made a life-altering decision. She fled. Genesis 16:6 tells us, "Then Hagar fled from her face. She ran away into the wilderness seeking refuge from Sarai's oppression." Imagine Hagar's state of mind as she journeyed into the unknown. She was pregnant, alone, and without resources. The wilderness was a harsh and unforgiving place, filled with dangers, wild animals, scorching heat, and the constant threat of dehydration. But for Hagar, the dangers of the wilderness were preferable to the abuse she faced in Abram's household. She was willing to risk everything for a chance at freedom, for a chance to protect herself and her unborn child. Hagar's pregnancy made her flight even more perilous. She was carrying Abram's heir, the child that was supposed to secure his legacy. Yet, she was forced to flee for her life. This stark contradiction underscores the injustice of her situation. She was both a vessel of promise and a victim of abuse. She was running away from abuse and toward an unknown destiny. Her flight into the wilderness was an act of desperation, a last resort. She was not just running away from Sarai. She was running away from a system that had devalued her, a system that had treated her as a mere object. She was running towards an uncertain future, but one where she might, just might, find a measure of peace and dignity. The wilderness represented both danger and the possibility of a new beginning. Hagar's flight marks a turning point in the narrative. The comfortable, ordered world of Abram's household has been shattered by jealousy and abuse. And now Hagar, the overlooked slave girl, is about to embark on a journey that will lead her to an unexpected encounter. But the wilderness is not just a place of danger. It is also a place where the overlooked can encounter the divine. Hagar was alone, pregnant, and terrified. Imagine the physical toll this journey took on her. The desert sun beat down mercilessly, dehydrating her. Every step was a struggle, her pregnant body heavy and weary. She probably had very little food or water. She was vulnerable, exposed to the elements and to any dangers that might lurk in the wilderness. But beyond the physical hardship, there was the emotional weight. She was running away from abuse, yes, but she was also running away from everything she knew. She was leaving behind her past, her people, and any semblance of security she might have had. Doubt and fear would have been constant companions on this journey. Was she strong enough to survive? Could she protect her unborn child? Where would she go? What would she do? And then, in the midst of this desolation, something extraordinary happened. Genesis 16:7 tells us, "The angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, the spring on the way to Shur." Think about that image. Hagar, a slave woman fleeing abuse, alone and pregnant in the harsh wilderness, is found by an angel of the Lord. Not in a temple, not in a place of worship, not surrounded by priests or kings, but in the desolate wilderness, by a spring of water, a source of life in a place of death. This encounter is unexpected, to say the least. In the ancient world, encounters with the divine were often reserved for those in positions of power and influence, for priests and kings. Yet here, God chooses to reveal himself to a marginalized slave woman, someone who was considered insignificant and disposable by the society around her. The angel of the Lord, a divine messenger, appears to Hagar in her most vulnerable state. The text doesn't describe the angel's appearance in detail, but the very presence of this being signals the extraordinary nature of this moment. This is not just a chance encounter. This is a divinely ordained meeting. The wilderness, a place of danger and isolation, becomes a place of revelation. Hagar's isolation is contrasted sharply with God's presence. She is alone, but she is not abandoned. She is forgotten by the world, but she is seen by God. Remember Hagar's vulnerable position as a slave fleeing from abuse. Remember the wilderness as a place of desperation. This encounter challenges our assumptions about who is worthy of divine attention. It reminds us that God sees those who are overlooked, that he hears the cries of the oppressed, and that he meets people where they are, even in the most desolate places. The significance of this moment cannot be overstated. Before Moses, before the established religious institutions, God appears to Hagar, a woman with no power, no status, and no voice. This encounter elevates her story, transforming her from a victim of abuse into a recipient of divine grace. It bestows agency and importance on someone who had been stripped of both. Imagine the shock, the disbelief, the awe that Hagar must have felt. To be seen, to be acknowledged, to be addressed by a divine messenger in the midst of her despair. It would have been a life-altering experience. This encounter offered her hope in a seemingly hopeless situation. It reminded her that she was not forgotten, that her life had value, and that her unborn child had a future. This scene also challenges our understanding of God's character. He is not a distant, uncaring deity. He is a God who actively seeks out those who are suffering, a God who meets them in their pain, a God who offers them comfort and hope. He is a God who sees the unseen, hears the unheard, and values the devalued. The spring of water by which the angel finds Hagar is also symbolic. Water is essential for life, especially in the desert. It represents provision, sustenance, and hope. The fact that the angel finds Hagar by a spring suggests that God is providing for her needs, both physical and spiritual. He is offering her a lifeline in the midst of her despair. This encounter is a powerful reminder that God's love and care extend to all people. regardless of their social status, their background, or their circumstances. Hagar's story is a testament to God's unwavering commitment to the marginalized and the oppressed. It is a story of hope, of redemption, and of divine intervention in the lives of those who are suffering. It's a story we need to remember. What do you think she's feeling at this moment? But this is not just a rescue. The angel is about to ask a question that will change how Hagar understands her own story. Genesis 16:8 gives us the angel's actual words, and they are deceptively simple. Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? Let's unpack this. First, notice how the angel addresses Hagar. He calls her by name, Hagar. This simple act of recognition is profound. She is not just another nameless slave. She is seen, acknowledged, and valued as an individual. Sarai views her as property, but for this moment, the angel restores Hagar's individual identity. It's easy to miss the dignity conferred in that moment. But then the angel adds, servant of Sarai. Why remind her of her lowly status? Is it a way of asserting authority, or is it something else? Perhaps the angel is acknowledging the reality of Hagar's situation, recognizing the constraints under which she lives. It's not a denial of her pain or her oppression, but a direct engagement with it. The angel isn't pretending that Hagar is free or powerful. He's meeting her exactly where she is, in the midst of her bondage. Now let's consider the two-part question. Where have you come from and where are you going? At first glance, these seem like straightforward questions, but in the context of Hagar's story, they are loaded with meaning. Where have you come from? This question forces Hagar to confront her past, to acknowledge the circumstances that have led her to this desolate place. She has come from Abram's household, a place of deep-seated conflict and abuse. She has come from a system that has exploited her, from Sarai's oppression, from the sting of jealousy and the weight of powerlessness. The question isn't just about geography, it's about identity. Where does Hagar belong? Is she defined by her servitude, her ethnicity, or her relationship to Abram and Sarai? The question challenges her. Who are you, Hagar, apart from these labels? Hagar is running away from a role and a destiny chosen for her, not by her. And where are you going? This question compels Hagar to consider her future, to envision a different possibility for her life and the life of her unborn child. Is she simply wandering aimlessly in the wilderness, driven by desperation and fear? Or does she have a destination in mind, a purpose to pursue? Is she running towards something or only away? Again, the question is about more than just geography. It's about hope. Does Hagar believe that a better future is possible? Does she dare to dream of a life where she is not a slave, where her child is not a second-class citizen, where she is valued and loved for who she is? The angel's question forces Hagar to articulate her hopes or her lack of them, to put words to her fears, her anxieties, her deepest desires. In the act of answering, she begins to define herself, to claim agency over her own story. The angel surely knew the answers to these questions. So why ask? Why put Hagar through the discomfort of articulating her pain and uncertainty? Perhaps the questions are not for the angel's benefit, but for Hagar's. Perhaps the act of being asked, of being given the opportunity to speak, is itself a form of grace. The angel isn't just offering her information or guidance. He's offering her a voice, inviting her to participate in her own redemption. The questions also highlight the significance of Hagar's choices. She is not simply a pawn. She is an active participant in her own destiny. Her decisions matter, and God is interested in her choices, her desires, and her fears. It's a reminder that even in the midst of suffering, even in the face of overwhelming odds, we have the power to choose. We can choose to give up, to despair, to succumb to our circumstances. Or we can choose to hope, to persevere, to believe that a better future is possible. The angel's questions cut through the noise, the confusion, the fear that must have been swirling in Hagar's mind. They force her to focus on the essential, her past, her present, and her future. They invite her to see her situation with clarity and to consider her options with intention. The angel's questions aren't accusatory or judgmental, but invitational, compassionate, and empowering. They offer Hagar the opportunity to redefine herself, to reclaim her story, and to step into a future of hope. This is not just about getting Hagar out of the desert. It's about helping her understand who she is and what she is capable of becoming. It's a pivotal moment, not just in Hagar's life, but in the unfolding story of God's relationship with humanity. Hagar's answer is simple, but the consequences will change everything. Now, what was Hagar's response to the angel's questions? She tells the truth. She is fleeing from Sarai. It's a stark admission of her desperate situation, spoken aloud to a divine messenger in the desolate emptiness of the desert. She doesn't try to sugarcoat it, doesn't try to justify her actions. She simply states the reality of her pain and her oppression. Hagar has no bargaining chips, no social standing, and no other witness. Yet she speaks plainly of the abuse she suffered. This encounter is already defying all the power structures of her world. But what comes next is the hard part, a moment of tension that echoes through the millennia. The angel doesn't offer Hagar immediate freedom or deliverance. Instead, he gives her a command that seems almost cruel. Return to your mistress and submit to her. Think about that for a moment. Hagar has just poured out her heart, revealed her pain and vulnerability in what feels like the safest place she could find. And the divine response is to send her back into the very situation that caused her so much suffering. It seems paradoxical, doesn't it? Why would God ask her to return to a place of abuse? Why would He command her to submit to someone who has mistreated her so badly? It's a command that clashes with our modern desire for immediate justice and relief from suffering. This is where we have to grapple with the complexities of faith and obedience. The angel's command challenges our modern sensibilities. We value independence, autonomy, and the right to escape abusive situations. But in the ancient world, Hagar's options were limited. As a slave, she had very little power or agency. Running away might have seemed like a solution, a path toward freedom, but it also exposed her to even greater dangers in the wilderness. She risked starvation, dehydration, wild animals, and potential exploitation by others. Outside Sarai's household, she had no protection, no resources, and no clear path forward. Perhaps the angel's command isn't about condoning abuse or upholding unjust systems. Perhaps it's about something deeper, about finding strength and resilience in the midst of suffering, about trusting in God's plan even when it doesn't make sense. Think about what the angel is asking. Can Hagar find a way to survive this? Can she find a way to resist bitterness and despair? Can she find a way to protect the child she carries, the physical embodiment of the promise and the conflict? We also have to consider the cultural context of Hagar's time. Submission was a deeply ingrained social norm, especially for women and slaves. To defy authority was to risk severe punishment, even death. The legal and social structures of the time offered little recourse for slaves who were mistreated. Their lives were essentially the property of their masters, who had the power to inflict physical and emotional abuse with little fear of consequence. So the angel's command may also be a pragmatic one, designed to protect Hagar from even greater harm. Returning to Sarai, however difficult, might have offered a degree of security that she couldn't find on her own. But that doesn't make it any easier to accept. It's still a difficult and demanding request, one that requires immense courage and faith. It's a story that forces us to confront the uncomfortable realities of power, oppression, and the complexities of divine will. How many sermons skip this detail, eager to get to the empowerment part? But the angel doesn't leave Hagar without hope. Along with the command to return, he offers her a promise, a glimpse into a future filled with blessing and abundance. Genesis 16:10 tells us, "I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too numerous to count." Imagine Hagar, a single vulnerable woman in the middle of the desert, the hot sun beating down on her, the taste of dust in her mouth, hearing these words. She is not just a nameless slave. She is not just a discarded pawn in someone else's game. She is the mother of a future nation, a people so numerous that they will defy calculation. This is a promise of national destiny, a covenant with God that positions Hagar as a matriarch in her own right. It mirrors the promise made to Abram, but it is delivered directly to Hagar, a woman with no social standing. This promise transforms Hagar's situation. It gives her a sense of purpose, a reason to endure the hardships that lie ahead. It reminds her that she is not forgotten, that God sees her and has a plan for her life. Even in her enslavement, God sees her potential and promises her a future. But the promise also carries a weight, a burden of responsibility. Hagar is now entrusted with the future of an entire people. Her decisions, her actions will have far-reaching consequences. This is not just about her own survival. It's about the survival and flourishing of her descendants. The success of this future nation rests in part on her willingness to obey the angel's command and return to Sarai. Think about the emotional impact of this moment. Hagar is being asked to return to a place of suffering, to submit to a woman who has mistreated her. But she is also being given a promise of unimaginable blessing. How does she reconcile these two realities? How does she find the strength to obey the angel's command, knowing that it will lead her back into a situation of pain and oppression? The conflict within her must have been immense, a battle between fear and hope, despair and faith. The angel's promise is not just about numbers, it's about legacy. Hagar's descendants will carry her story, her resilience, her faith. They will be a testament to God's faithfulness, to His unwavering commitment to those who are marginalized and oppressed. They will be a living reminder that even in the darkest of circumstances, hope can endure. Do you think that's what she sees in her mind's eye? A vast multitude of people who will trace their lineage back to her. The Egyptian slave who encountered God in the wilderness. But the promise does not stop there. Hagar is about to receive a revelation about the child she carries. In the ancient world, names carried weight, expressing identity, destiny, and divine purpose. By naming Hagar's son Ishmael, God declares His presence in her life, His attentiveness to her pain, and His intention to shape the boy's future. It's a direct and personal message given to Hagar, not filtered through Abram or Sarai. It's her child, her future, her connection to the divine. She must have realized God was not just acknowledging her suffering, but entrusting her with the responsibility of raising a child whose very name would be a testament to God's hearing. But the angel's prophecy takes a sharp turn in the very next verse, Genesis 16:12. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he will live in hostility toward all his brothers. How do we reconcile this with the promise of countless descendants? It's a prophecy that is both promising and ominous, filled with both hope and hardship, painting a picture of Ishmael as an untamed, independent, and potentially volatile figure. This is not the docile, submissive child one might expect. This is a wild donkey of a man. To understand the full weight of this, remember that the wild donkey, or onager, symbolized untamed freedom and resistance to domestication. It roamed freely, beholden to no one, defiant of control. To call someone a wild donkey of a man suggested someone rebellious, intractable, and difficult to manage, something between a lone wolf and an insult. But it also spoke to a certain kind of strength, a refusal to be confined. The prophecy suggests that Ishmael will live on the fringes of society, challenging authority and resisting assimilation. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, paints an unsettling image of conflict and isolation. It suggests that Ishmael will constantly be at odds with those around him, forced to defend himself and his interests against hostility. Even in this seemingly negative portrayal, there is a hint of strength and self-reliance. Ishmael will not be a victim. He will not be easily defeated. He will be a fighter, a survivor, capable of holding his own in a hostile world. The final part of the prophecy, he will live in hostility toward all his brothers, adds another layer. This suggests that Ishmael's conflicts will not be limited to strangers. He will also be at odds with his own kin, with those who should be his allies. This could refer to future conflicts between Ishmael's descendants and the descendants of Isaac, Abram's son through Sarai. Whatever the specific interpretation, this prophecy makes it clear that Ishmael's life will not be easy. His destiny is not one of peaceful assimilation, but of struggle and unwavering independence. The angel's prophecy presents a complex and ambiguous picture of Ishmael's future, not a straightforward blessing or a simple curse, but a mixture of both, a blend of promise and hardship. Imagine Hagar hearing these words. Just moments before, she had been given the hope of a son and a promise of countless descendants. Now, she is being told that this son will be a wild donkey of a man, a figure of conflict. How does she process this? Does she feel fear, anxiety, or perhaps even a sense of pride in her son's untamed spirit? The text doesn't tell us Hagar's immediate reaction, but we can imagine the mix of emotions that must have been swirling within her. In the ancient world, prophecy was rarely a simple matter of predicting the future. It was often a way of understanding the present, of identifying the forces at play, and of charting a course for the future. The prophecy about Ishmael is not just a prediction. It is also a challenge to Hagar, an invitation to shape her son's destiny. Will she raise him to be a man of violence, or will she find a way to channel his wild spirit into something positive? Will she succumb to fear, or will she embrace the challenges ahead? The meaning of Ishmael's name, God hears, becomes even more poignant in light of the prophecy about his character. Even though Ishmael's life will be marked by conflict, God will always be with him, hearing his cries, seeing his struggles, and providing for his needs. The promise of countless descendants is not nullified by the prophecy. Ishmael's descendants will be a people forged in the fires of adversity, shaped by the challenges they face and defined by their unwavering independence. And this is the detail most people pass over. What does it mean that the angel is telling Hagar about her son's destiny? Not Sarai or Abram. Hagar's reaction to the angel's words is not explicitly recorded in the text, but we can only imagine the awe and wonder that must have filled her as she realized the magnitude of what had just transpired. She, a slave woman, alone and vulnerable in the wilderness, had encountered the divine. The God of Abram and Sarai, the God of the Hebrews, had seen her, had heard her, and had spoken to her. This encounter transformed her understanding of her place in the world, of her relationship with the divine, and of her own inherent worth. And what does she do in response to this encounter? She gives God a name. Genesis 16:13 tells us, "She gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. You are the God who sees me." For she said, "I have now seen the one who sees me." This is the moment that truly sets Hagar apart. She doesn't just receive a message from God. She responds by naming him, by defining an aspect of his character based on her own experience. Think about the power of that name, El Roi. It means the God who sees me. Not just the God who exists or the God who creates or the God who commands, but the God who sees. Hagar doesn't just believe in God. She knows God sees her. He sees her suffering, her loneliness, her fear. He sees her not as a nameless, faceless slave, but as an individual worthy of his attention and care. In the ancient world, naming something was an act of power. It was a way of claiming ownership, of defining its essence, of understanding its place in the world. By naming God El Roi, Hagar wasn't just acknowledging his existence, she was claiming a relationship with him. She was asserting that he was not a distant, impersonal deity, but a God who was intimately involved in her life. What does it mean that Hagar, a marginalized woman in a patriarchal society, is the first person in the Bible to give God this name? Sarai and Abram are prominent figures in their society, pillars of the community, with power and influence. Yet they don't give God a name that defines who he is. Hagar, an Egyptian slave, a woman with no social standing, receives this profound revelation and gives him this intimate name. It suggests that God's presence is not limited to those in positions of power or privilege. The divine encounters are available to all, regardless of their social status, their gender, or their ethnicity. God chooses to reveal himself to those who are often overlooked and marginalized by society. Hagar's story is a powerful reminder that God sees those who are suffering, those who are oppressed, those who are forgotten. He hears their cries, he understands their pain, and he responds with compassion and grace. But the verse doesn't end there. Hagar goes on to say, "I have now seen the one who sees me." This is a profound statement with far-reaching implications. In the ancient world, it was believed that seeing God would result in death. The divine was considered so powerful, so overwhelming, that mortal eyes could not gaze upon it and live. And yet, Hagar declares that she has seen God, and she is still alive. What does this mean? Does it mean that she literally saw God in his full, unmediated glory? Or does it mean that she experienced his presence in a way that was so profound, so transformative, that it was as if she had seen him with her own eyes? Whatever the specific interpretation, Hagar's statement is a testament to the power of her encounter with the angel of the Lord. She has not only been seen by God, but she has also seen God. She has experienced His presence in a way that has changed her forever. This brings us back to the title, Hagar saw God before Moses. Think about the implications of that. Moses, the great lawgiver, the prophet who led the Israelites out of Egypt, is often considered the quintessential figure of divine encounter in the Old Testament. But here, centuries before Moses, we have Hagar, an Egyptian slave, encountering God in the wilderness and giving Him a name. Think about how radical this is. Hagar names God before Moses receives the Ten Commandments. Hagar's wilderness encounter happens in Genesis, long before the later Moses wilderness revelations. She sees the God who sees, El Roi, and is forever changed. What did Hagar understand in this moment that the powerful people around her missed? What did she grasp about God's character, about His concern for the outcast, that eluded those who were comfortable and secure in their social standing? Perhaps it was her vulnerability, her desperation, her utter dependence on God that allowed her to see Him in a way that others could not. She saw that God was not just a distant, impersonal force, but a loving, compassionate presence who was intimately involved in the lives of those who were suffering. She saw that He was a God who saw her, who heard her, and who cared for her. She saw that even in the darkest of circumstances, even in the depths of the wilderness, she was not alone. Now, hold that in your mind, El Roi, the God who sees. Because what happens next reveals a painful truth about how the world treats women. Hagar's story is a powerful testament to the fact that even in the darkest of times, even after divine encounter, life can return to something resembling normal. We are not told of any grand celebration, of any dramatic change in Hagar's social standing. Instead, she simply returns. She goes back to Abram and Sarai. She goes back to the household where she was mistreated, where she was a slave, where she was made to feel less than human. But something has changed. Hagar is not the same woman who fled into the wilderness. She has seen God. She has been given a promise. She carries within her the seed of a nation. She knows that her son, Ishmael, will be blessed, that his descendants will be too numerous to count. She has named God El Roi, and that name has changed her too. The God who sees her will see her son and his children. The biblical text doesn't delve into the details of Hagar's daily life upon her return. We can only imagine the subtle shifts in her demeanor, the newfound sense of dignity and purpose that she carries within her. Perhaps she interacts with Sarai with a quiet confidence, knowing that she is now more than just a servant. Perhaps she finds solace in the knowledge that God is with her, even in this place of hardship. The text is quiet here, but the silence isn't empty. What changed when she went back? Did she share her experience with Abram? Did Sarai notice a change in Hagar? Did the other servants in the household sense that something profound had happened? What does it mean to return to a life of servitude when you know you are carrying divine promise inside you? We can also wonder, was it harder to obey Sarai after she understood the protection of El Roi? How did she reconcile divine promise with daily oppression? Because the story doesn't skip ahead to Ishmael's triumph. It lingers on the silent return, on the daily obedience, on the faith that must have grown in the dark while she waited. Then Genesis 16:15 tells us, "So Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram named his son, whom Hagar bore Ishmael." The birth of Ishmael is a testament to God's faithfulness. He promised Hagar a son, and he delivered. Abram names the child Ishmael in accordance with the angel's instructions. The name itself is a reminder of God's attentiveness. God hears. Think about this detail. Abram names the child. The text gives Abram his agency here to name his son after the angel told Hagar the name first. It's a subtle detail, but important. Abram was 86 years old when Ishmael was born. He had waited a long time for an heir, and now, finally, he had a son. But the promise was always bigger than just one son. The next verse in Genesis 16 marks a pause, a silence. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to Abram. That's it. The chapter ends. It's a simple statement of fact. It doesn't tell us anything about the years that followed, about the joys and challenges of raising Ishmael, about the dynamics between Hagar, Sarai, and Abram. In fact, there is a 13-year gap between the birth of Ishmael and the birth of Isaac, Sarai's son. 13 years of silence. 13 years in which Hagar raises her son, knowing that he is destined for greatness, knowing that God has promised to bless him and make him into a great nation. 13 years in which Sarai remains barren, her hopes dwindling, her resentment perhaps growing. 13 years of quiet tension within the household. What happened in those 13 years? Did Hagar teach Ishmael about El Roi, the God who sees? Did she tell him about her encounter with the angel in the wilderness? Did she instill in him a sense of his own destiny? Did Abram love Ishmael? Did Sarai resent him? We aren't told. We aren't given access to their inner thoughts or their daily conversations. We are left to imagine the complexities of their relationships, the unspoken tensions, the quiet hopes and fears that simmer beneath the surface. We are simply told that Ishmael was born and that Abram was 86 years old. Consider it, 13 years, a long time to wait, a long time for a promise to remain unfulfilled, a long time for hope to either flourish or fade. What does it mean to live with a divine promise that hasn't yet come to pass? But the peace will not last, because in the ancient world, a son is not enough. And the promise to Abram is about to create a new crisis. 13 years passed. 13 years of Ishmael growing into a young man. 13 years of Sarai waiting, hoping, perhaps doubting. But then something miraculous happens. Genesis 21:1 tells us, "The Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah as he had promised." After years of barrenness, after years of waiting, Sarah conceives and gives birth to a son. She names him Isaac, which means he laughs. The birth of Isaac is a moment of incredible joy for Sarah and Abraham. It's the fulfillment of God's promise, a testament to his faithfulness. Can you imagine the relief that Abraham must have felt? The sheer elation of Sarah. Their lives were changed forever, and the relationship between Abraham and Sarah would shift too. They were now united not only by shared history and love, but by the shared miracle of this child. The birth of Isaac cements their bond, elevates Sarai, and puts Hagar in a dangerous position. This family is about to get a lot more complicated. But the birth of Isaac also creates a new tension within the household. Sarah now has her own son, her own heir, and Ishmael, the son of Hagar, is no longer the only child, no longer the sole focus of Abraham's attention. The Bible says that Sarah was overjoyed, and she declared, "God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me." Can you picture the scene? The celebrations, the feasting, the sheer exuberance of the household. But in the midst of all this joy, there's a subtle undercurrent of anxiety, because the arrival of Isaac also means a shift in the power dynamics, a shift in the lines of inheritance, a shift in the very fabric of their lives. And that's when something happens that changes everything. Genesis 21:9 says, Sarah saw Ishmael, son of Hagar, the Egyptian, was mocking. Mocking who exactly? The text tells us he was mocking her son Isaac. But what did Ishmael do? What exactly did Sarah see that caused her to react so strongly? The Hebrew word used here for mocking implies more than just playful teasing. It suggests a more malicious intent, a kind of scorn or ridicule that was deeply offensive to Sarah. Some scholars believe that Ishmael's actions were a challenge to Isaac's legitimacy as the heir, a questioning of Sarah's role, a threat to the established order. Ishmael, now a teenager, might have seen Isaac as a rival, a threat to his own future, and perhaps he acted out in resentment and frustration. Perhaps Ishmael was simply playing like any other child, but Sarah, sensitive to the precariousness of her position and the future of her son, interpreted his actions as a threat. Was it youthful exuberance or something more sinister? The text is ambiguous, but Sarah's reaction is decisive. The commentaries are full of speculation. Was Ishmael taunting Isaac about his age? Was he questioning his divine origin? Or more simply, was Ishmael engaging in the kind of boisterous, slightly over-the-top behavior that older siblings sometimes inflict on younger ones? Think about the emotional context. Sarah had waited decades for this child. She had endured the shame of infertility, the complexities of surrogacy, the tension with Hagar. Now that Isaac was finally here, she was fiercely protective of him, determined to secure his future. And anything that threatened that future, anything that seemed to undermine Isaac's position, was met with swift and unwavering opposition. Was Sarah overreacting? Perhaps. But her reaction reveals the depth of her anxieties, the intensity of her love for Isaac, and the precariousness of Hagar's position in the family. She perceived Ishmael's mockery as a direct threat to her son's inheritance, a challenge to her own authority, and a questioning of God's promise. And what about Abraham? How did he respond to all of this? The text doesn't tell us immediately, but we can imagine the turmoil he must have felt. He loved both of his sons. He had made promises to both Hagar and Sarah. He was caught in the middle of a conflict that threatened to tear his family apart. The tension between Sarah and Hagar escalates, driven by jealousy, fear, and the struggle for inheritance. Sarah's joy at Isaac's birth is quickly overshadowed by her resentment toward Hagar and Ishmael. The promises made to Hagar concerning Ishmael's descendants now seem to stand in direct opposition to Sarah's desires for Isaac. The prophecy about Ishmael's character as a wild donkey of a man may have seemed particularly threatening to Sarah, fueling her fears that he would be a constant source of conflict and instability. This is where the story turns, because Sarah is about to demand the unthinkable, and Abraham will have to choose sides. Sarah's joy at holding her own child, the one she had waited for so desperately, is now mixed with a bitter demand. Genesis 21:10 tells us exactly what she said to Abraham. Get rid of that slave woman and her son, for that slave woman's son will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac. Can you imagine the shock that must have resonated through Abraham? All that he had hoped for, all that he had worked for, was being threatened. It wasn't just about earthly possessions, it was about legacy, about the very future of his family and the fulfillment of God's promises. Sarah isn't just asking him to send away a servant. She is demanding he exile his own son, Ishmael, whom he had loved and nurtured for over a decade, a son to whom God himself had made promises, promises of countless descendants, of a great nation to come. Sarah is drawing a line in the sand, an ultimatum that forces Abraham to confront the impossible. It's a clash between Sarah's fierce protectiveness over Isaac and her fear that Ishmael might somehow undermine his future. It is a clash between the promise to Hagar and the promise to Sarah. The Bible tells us that this request deeply distressed Abraham. He loved Ishmael. He had watched him grow into a young man, perhaps envisioning him as a leader, a warrior, a patriarch in his own right. He had received God's promise about Ishmael's future, and now he was being asked to abandon him. Can you feel Abraham's turmoil? On one side, he has Sarah, his wife, the mother of his long-awaited heir. On the other, he has Hagar and Ishmael, vulnerable and dependent on his protection. He is caught in an impossible bind, torn between love, duty, and the weight of God's promises. But Abraham, even as a patriarch, is not the final authority here. The Bible tells us something remarkable happens. God intervenes. Genesis 21:12 says, "But God said to him, 'Do not be so distressed about the boy and your slave woman. Listen to whatever Sarah tells you, because it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned.'" God's words are stark, uncompromising. He's telling Abraham to prioritize Isaac, to secure his lineage. Isaac is to be the heir of the covenant. Isaac's line is the one through which God's promises will be fulfilled. Ishmael's blessing, the blessing Hagar received in the wilderness, will come in a different way. This isn't a dismissal of Ishmael or a rejection of God's promise to Hagar. It's a clarification of the chosen line, a designation of who will carry the mantle of the covenant. Now, before we judge Abraham too harshly, before we condemn him for what seems like a callous act, we need to consider what was at stake for him, what pressures he was under, what choices he believed he had. His identity, his worth, his entire purpose was tied to this promise of a nation, a legacy. And God had made it clear that legacy would come through Isaac. The text doesn't offer us much insight into Abraham's inner struggle. We aren't privy to his conversations with Sarah, his prayers to God, his moments of doubt and fear. We only know that he obeyed. And so, with a heavy heart, Abraham makes the excruciating decision. Genesis 21:14 tells us, "Early the next morning, Abraham took some food and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar. He set them on her shoulders together with the boy and sent her away." Can you imagine the scene? The early morning light, the quiet hush of the household. Abraham, his face etched with sorrow, preparing Hagar and Ishmael for their departure. He gives them bread, the staple of life, and a skin of water, their only hope for survival in the arid wilderness. He places these provisions on Hagar's shoulders, a symbolic act of burden bearing, a testament to her strength and resilience. And then, with a final lingering look, he sends them away. Think of Hagar's emotions in that moment: betrayal, abandonment, fear. She's being cast out, not for any wrongdoing of her own, but because she is seen as a threat to Sarah's son. She's being sent into the wilderness, a place of danger and uncertainty, with only a meager supply of food and water to sustain her and her son. This is not merely a journey. It is an expulsion, a severing of ties, a rejection of her place within the family. It's a moment of profound injustice, a stark reminder of Hagar's vulnerability and her lack of power in this patriarchal society. The birth of Isaac, which had been a moment of incredible joy and promise, has now led to this heartbreaking separation. The tension between Sarah and Hagar, simmering beneath the surface for years, has finally erupted into open conflict, resulting in this devastating act of expulsion. Hagar is not just leaving a home, she is leaving behind a life, a community, a sense of belonging. And Ishmael, a young boy who has known no other life, is being uprooted from everything familiar and thrust into an unknown and perilous future. Now Hagar faces the wilderness again, but this time, everything has changed. She is not just running from abuse. She is fighting for her son's very life. Can you imagine the sheer terror that Hagar must be feeling? She had been given a promise that Ishmael would be the father of many descendants. But right now, survival seems impossible. The very idea of a future lineage seems like a cruel taunt in the face of their immediate peril. God's promise feels distant, conditional, almost like a trap. Is she and Ishmael now meant to die in the desert after God himself made a promise to her? The Bible tells us in Genesis 21:15 that the water in the skin was used up. The very thing that stood between them and death, the source of life itself, has vanished. The skin, once full and heavy with hope, is now light and empty, a cruel reminder of their dwindling chances. The scraping sound of the empty water skin against the sand must have been almost deafening in the vast silence. Picture Hagar and Ishmael stumbling through the desolate landscape, their steps growing weaker with each passing hour. The sun is relentless, baking the earth and draining their bodies. The air shimmers with heat, distorting the horizon and offering no respite. Every rock glares with reflected heat. Every breath is a painful reminder of their desperate thirst. Ishmael, a young boy who just hours before was running and playing, now struggles to keep pace. His lips are cracked and dry, his eyes sunken. He cries out for water, his voice raspy and weak, each plea a dagger in Hagar's heart. She can taste the dust in his mouth with every cry. Each whimper is a brutal reminder of her powerlessness. Hagar scans the horizon desperately, searching for any sign of relief. A tree, a rock, anything that might offer a moment's shade. But there is nothing. Only the endless expanse of sand and rock seems to mock her despair. She remembers the lushness of Egypt, the coolness of the Nile, the abundance of food and water. Now that world seems impossibly distant, a paradise lost. She tries to ration the remaining crumbs of bread, but it's not enough. Their bodies are screaming for water, for relief from the relentless heat. Dehydration is setting in, clouding their minds and weakening their resolve. Hagar can feel her thoughts blurring, her vision swimming. She knows that Ishmael is suffering even more. Hagar knows that they are running out of time. She can feel her own strength failing, but she pushes on, driven by an instinct as old as motherhood itself, the need to protect her child. She forces herself to remember the angel's promise, clinging to it as a lifeline in this sea of despair. But even that promise is starting to feel hollow. But there comes a point when even the strongest spirit falters. Overcome with despair, she can't bear to watch her son die. The knowledge that she is failing him, that she is unable to save him, is a torment greater than any physical suffering. Her mind races with regret, with what-ifs, with the agonizing awareness that she has led him to this point. The text tells us, "Then she went off and sat down about a bow shot away, for she thought, I cannot watch the boy die." And as she sat there, she began to sob. This is not merely sadness. It's a complete and utter breakdown, a surrender to the overwhelming forces of despair. A bow shot. That's the distance she puts between herself and her son, not out of malice, not out of indifference, but out of a mother's agonizing love. She can't bear to see him suffer, to watch his life slip away. So she removes herself from the scene, hoping to spare herself the unbearable pain. of witnessing his final moments. It is an act of both love and desperation, a testament to the impossible choices that mothers sometimes face. Imagine the scene. Hagar places Ishmael under a bush, a meager attempt to shield him from the sun's scorching rays. The bush offers little protection, but it's all she can do. She kisses him, strokes his hair, whispers words of love and comfort, knowing that these may be her last. She tries to smooth the sand beneath him, tries to create some small measure of comfort in this desolate place. Then, she walks away. Not far, just a bow shot, the distance an archer can shoot an arrow. She sits down on the parched earth, her body racked with sobs. She can hear Ishmael's weak cries, each one a fresh wave of agony. The sound echoes in the vast emptiness, a constant reminder of her impending loss. Hagar is utterly helpless. She has no water, no food, no strength left to fight. All she can do is sit and wait, her heart breaking with every breath. She has been abandoned, rejected, and left to die in the wilderness. The promises made to her seem like a cruel joke now. How can Ishmael become a great nation if he dies here, alone and forgotten? Was the encounter with the angel a lie? Was she a fool to believe that God cared for her? She is alone with her grief, her despair, and the agonizing certainty of her son's imminent death. This isn't just about physical suffering. It's about the shattering of hope, the crushing weight of abandonment, and the unbearable pain of a mother facing the loss of her child. Hagar's story in this moment is a story of utter desperation, a stark portrayal of the devastating effects of abandonment and the fragility of life in the face of overwhelming circumstances. This is not a noble sacrifice or a moment of triumph. It is a moment of utter defeat, a testament to the brutal realities of life in the ancient world. Hagar's previous encounter with the angel and the promises concerning Ishmael seem like a distant memory now. How could God have promised so much, only to let them die like this? Has she been utterly abandoned? The question must have haunted her. This is the lowest point of her story. But the God she named El Roi, the God who sees, has not forgotten her. The God who sees is about to act again. And then, the impossible happens. The Bible tells us in Genesis 21:17 that God heard the voice of the boy, not just any cry, not just any sound, but the voice of the boy. Ishmael's voice. In the midst of the wilderness, in the face of death, God heard the distinct individual cry of a child. Think about that for a moment. In a world filled with suffering, with countless voices crying out in pain, God singled out Ishmael's. This isn't just about hearing a general plea for help. It's about recognizing the unique value and worth of one specific, vulnerable human being. It's about the depth of God's attention, His ability to see and hear even the faintest whisper of distress. The text continues, "And the angel of the Lord called to Hagar from heaven." The same angel who had met her by the spring so many years before. The same messenger who had promised her countless descendants. This time, the angel doesn't appear in person. The voice comes from heaven, a sign of divine authority and power. It's a reminder that even when we feel utterly alone, we are still within God's reach. What does the angel say? The words are simple, direct, and filled with compassion. "What troubles you, Hagar? Do not be afraid." What troubles you, Hagar? Not an accusation, not a judgment, but a question born of genuine concern. God acknowledges Hagar's pain, her fear, her despair. He sees her in all her brokenness, and He asks her what's wrong. It's an invitation to be honest, to voice her deepest fears, to admit her powerlessness. Do not be afraid. a command, a promise, a lifeline thrown into the darkness. God knows Hagar's terror. He knows the depth of her despair, and he tells her in no uncertain terms not to be afraid. It's a reminder that even in the face of death, hope remains. That even when we feel abandoned, we are not truly alone. That God is with us, offering courage and strength in the midst of our trials. Remember what Hagar named him, El Roi, the God who sees. He saw her then and he sees her now. And then, the turning point. God opened her eyes and she saw a well of water. It's not that the well magically appeared. It was already there. The provision was there all along, hidden in plain sight. But Hagar's eyes were clouded by grief, by fear, by the overwhelming sense of despair. She was so focused on the problem, so consumed by her own pain, that she couldn't see the solution that was right in front of her. This is a powerful reminder that sometimes the answer to our prayers is not a miraculous intervention, but a shift in perspective. God doesn't always change our circumstances, but he often changes the way we see them. He opens our eyes to the resources, the opportunities, the possibilities that we have been missing all along. Imagine Hagar's reaction, the shock, the disbelief, the overwhelming relief. The well wasn't some grand flowing river. It was just a well. But in that moment, it was everything. It was life itself. The text tells us that she went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. A simple act, but one filled with profound meaning. Hagar, who had been so close to giving up, so overwhelmed by despair, now acts with renewed purpose. She fills the skin with water, carefully and deliberately, knowing that every drop is precious. She brings the water to Ishmael, lifting his head and gently pouring it into his parched mouth. And Ishmael drinks. Life returns to his eyes. His body, weak and dehydrated just moments before, begins to revive. The color returns to his face. He is saved. Hagar has saved her son, not through some act of extraordinary heroism, but through simple obedience and a renewed sense of hope. God provided the water, but it was Hagar who had to get up, fill the skin, and give it to her son. It's a testament to the power of perseverance, to the importance of taking action even when we feel overwhelmed. To remember El Roi, even when we feel unseen. God had promised Ishmael would become a great nation, but that promise was hanging by a thread. Now, because Hagar trusted again, because Hagar acted, that promise could continue. The immediate crisis is over. Hagar and Ishmael will live, but that is not the detail that changes everything. Why does the text say God heard the boy's voice, but sent the angel to Hagar? So God heard Ishmael's voice, but sent the angel to Hagar. Why? Perhaps because Hagar, having already encountered the divine and named God El Roi, was now the one equipped to receive this message, to see the provision, and to act on it. The text moves forward now. The crisis has passed. Ishmael will live. And now, Genesis 21:20 tells us, God was with the boy as he grew up. This is a simple statement, but it speaks volumes. After the despair, after the near-death experience, after the divine intervention, God's presence remains. God was with Ishmael, not just in that moment of crisis, but consistently, throughout his life. Think about what that means. God didn't just rescue Ishmael and then abandon him. He was present in the everyday moments, in the struggles and triumphs of growing up in the harsh environment of the wilderness. What does that presence mean for Ishmael? It means he was never truly alone. It means he had a source of strength and guidance, even when his circumstances were difficult. It means that the promise made to Hagar, the promise of a great nation, was still very much alive. The verse continues, "He lived in the wilderness and became an archer." The wilderness, the very place that had threatened to be their tomb, becomes Ishmael's home. He adapts, he learns, he thrives. He becomes an archer, a skilled hunter, a survivor. This detail is significant because it reflects Ishmael's independent and resourceful nature, qualities that were prophesied by the angel before his birth. The angel said he would be a wild donkey of a man, independent and strong, and becoming an archer is a tangible demonstration of that prophecy coming to pass. It's a skill that requires discipline, focus, and a deep understanding of the environment, and Ishmael's archery becomes a symbol of his resilience, his ability to not just survive, but to flourish in the face of adversity. Finally, Genesis 21:21 tells us, his mother got a wife for him from the land of Egypt. Hagar, despite her own hardships and displacement, does not forget her son's future. She takes the initiative to find him a wife from her homeland, Egypt. This detail is important for several reasons. First, it shows Hagar's continued care and concern for Ishmael, showing that she wants him to have a good life, a family, a future. Second, it highlights Hagar's connection to her own roots. Even though she has been living in a foreign land, she maintains a connection to her Egyptian heritage, and perhaps she wanted Ishmael to have a connection to his heritage as well. It's a subtle but powerful act of cultural preservation, ensuring that Ishmael's descendants would carry on a part of her own identity, and telling us that Ishmael did not simply become absorbed by Abram's clan, but that he now has his own history. We can imagine Hagar telling her son stories of her homeland, sharing memories of her family and her life before she became Sarai's servant. These stories would have given Ishmael a sense of identity and belonging, connecting him to a larger history and a wider world. In finding him a wife from Egypt, Hagar is actively shaping her son's future, ensuring that he has a partner who understands his background and shares his values. This simple act also fulfills the promise that Ishmael will become a great nation. Marriage and family are essential for building a nation, and Hagar's role in finding Ishmael a wife is a critical step in that process, showing she is actively contributing to the fulfillment of God's promise, even years after the initial prophecy. Hagar's actions here echo the story of finding water in the desert, because she is the one who knows how to survive, to take action, to secure the next generation. Remember, the text says God heard the boy's voice, but the angel speaks to Hagar, revealing that she is the one God trusts to carry the message and to act on the provision. This is the last we hear of Hagar in the biblical narrative. Her story fades into the background, overshadowed by the story of Isaac and his descendants, but her impact remains. She is the mother of a great nation, a woman who encountered the angel of the Lord in the wilderness, and a testament to God's unwavering care for the marginalized and overlooked. The promise to Abraham is now diverging in two directions, because God remembered his promise to Hagar. So what does this story reveal about God's promise to the overlooked? And why has this woman been forgotten for so long? Hagar's story, though often relegated to the periphery, stands as a powerful testament to God's unwavering care for the marginalized and the overlooked, particularly women facing hardship and injustice. Think about the implications. A woman, an enslaved woman, in the ancient Near East, encountering the divine in such a profound way. Her story challenges the notion that God only works through powerful leaders or within the confines of established religious institutions. It declares that God sees and hears the cries of those who are suffering, even when they feel forgotten by the world. Consider Hagar's status in ancient society. She was an Egyptian slave, a foreigner in a patriarchal and hierarchical culture. She had no social standing, no legal rights, and no voice. She was vulnerable to the whims of her mistress and the demands of her master. Yet, in her most desperate moment, God intervened. He sent an angel to find her in the wilderness, to speak to her directly, and to make promises about her future and the future of her son. It is easy to forget how shocking that would have been. And it wasn't just a one-time intervention. God repeatedly showed his care for Hagar. He promised her a multitude of descendants through Ishmael. He heard Ishmael's cry in the wilderness and provided water to save their lives. He ensured that Ishmael grew up and thrived, fulfilling the prophecy that he would become a great nation. God's actions demonstrate a consistent pattern of looking out for the vulnerable and marginalized, challenging the social norms of the time. This pattern echoes throughout the Bible. Think about Ruth, a Moabite widow who found refuge and provision in Israel. Think about Hannah, a barren woman whose prayers were answered and who dedicated her son Samuel to God's service. Think about Mary, a young unwed mother who was chosen to bear the Messiah. These women, like Hagar, were often overlooked and marginalized, yet God saw them, heard them, and used them in extraordinary ways. Why do we remember their stories but not Hagar's? Perhaps it's because Hagar's story is uncomfortable. It challenges our assumptions about power and privilege. It reminds us that God's love extends to those who are often excluded and ignored. It forces us to confront the injustices that exist in our own societies and communities. But there's something more, something unique to Hagar's story, her naming of God as El Roi, the God who sees. This act is not just a simple expression of gratitude. It's a profound theological statement. It reveals Hagar's understanding of God's character and her personal experience of his presence in her life. What does it mean to declare that God sees? It means that God is not distant or indifferent to our suffering. He is intimately aware of our pain, our struggles, and our needs. He sees us in our most vulnerable moments when we feel unseen by the world. Hagar's naming of God as El Roi is especially significant because it happens before the later Moses wilderness revelations. Think about that order. The story in Genesis is followed centuries later by Moses leading the Israelites through the wilderness, where God reveals his name as Yahweh and gives them the law. Moses, a leader, receives revelation, but Hagar, an enslaved woman, names God based on her own experience. What can we learn from the order of these stories? Perhaps it's a reminder that personal encounter precedes codified law, that the experience of being seen and cared for by God is foundational to our understanding of his character. The powerful implications are still unfolding. What does this suggest about who can truly see God? Hagar wasn't a priest, a prophet, or a king. She was a slave woman in the wilderness, yet she saw God, and her encounter transformed her life. It gave her hope, courage, and a sense of purpose. It empowered her to act on behalf of her son and to secure his future. Hagar's story is more than just a historical account. It's a testament to the unwavering care of God for those who are pushed to the edges. It reveals a God who hears and responds to the cries of those who suffer, even when they feel entirely forgotten. Think about the desolate landscape she faced, the relentless sun, the scarcity of water, the ever-present threat of the unknown. Yet, in that place of vulnerability, she encountered divine presence. Hagar's journey in that arid place embodies a powerful message of hope, resilience, and the enduring availability of divine attention. Her life underscores the inherent dignity of every human being, regardless of their social status or background. It invites us to see beyond superficial markers and to recognize the divine spark within each person we encounter. Remember the patriarchal society that sought to define her worth solely by her ability to bear children for her mistress. Remember how easily she could have been discarded, erased from the narrative. Yet even when all hope seemed lost, she was seen, her cries were heard, and provision was made for her and her son. Her life reminds us that even in our darkest moments, we are not truly alone. We may feel abandoned, forgotten, or insignificant, but we are not unseen. The meaning of her declaration, "The God who sees," resonates deeply with those who have experienced the pain of being invisible, ignored, or devalued. It speaks to the lonely, the outcast, and the heartbroken. Her story teaches us that compassion extends to all people, especially those who are suffering. It challenges us to broaden our understanding of who is worthy of divine attention and to recognize the image of the divine in every person, regardless of their background or circumstances. Recall that Isaac, not Ishmael, was chosen as the son of promise. Despite this, neither Hagar nor Ishmael were forsaken. We can carry this legacy forward. We can be the people who notice the single parent struggling, the newcomer building a life, the isolated neighbor living alone. We can be the ones who offer a kind word, a helping hand, a listening ear. We can become people who reflect the heart of the one who sees. Remember, encountering the angel led Hagar to name God in a new way. The question, "Where have you come from and where are you going?" reframed her identity from a runaway slave to a woman with a divinely appointed future. This is about recognizing inherent worth and advocating for well-being. What if the church remembered her story more fully? What if we centered her in our understanding of divine character? What if we recognized that some of the most profound encounters happen not in palaces or temples, but in difficult places with the overlooked? The world might look very different. It might be a world where everyone is seen, heard, and valued. Because the truth is, her story isn't just her story. It's part of our story too. It's a reminder that even in difficulty, we are not alone, and we are not forgotten. Her experience, predating Moses' encounters, offers a unique perspective on revelation. It suggests that concern for the vulnerable is a consistent theme, not merely a later innovation. The fact that a woman, a slave, and a foreigner was the first to give God this particular name speaks volumes about divine priorities. This is not to diminish the importance of Moses' encounters, but rather to highlight the diversity of ways in which divine presence is revealed. Hagar's experience with her son Ishmael in the arid landscape is not just a historical anecdote, but a timeless parable of hope. The well that miraculously appeared represents more than just a source of water. It symbolizes God's provision and unwavering support in times of despair. The promise that Ishmael would become a great nation underscores the idea that even in the most unlikely circumstances, blessings can emerge. Hagar's initial flight into the wilderness was driven by fear and desperation. Yet, through her encounters there, she discovered inner strength, resilience, and a deep connection to the divine. Hagar's life reminds us that moments of crisis can become opportunities for transformation. Her life is a testament to the power of faith, courage, and the unwavering belief that God is present in our lives, even when we feel most alone. Hagar's naming of God as the God who sees reflects her understanding of God's personal and attentive nature. She realized that God was not a distant or detached observer, but rather an active participant in her life. Her declaration is a powerful affirmation of hope and trust in the face of adversity. It is an example of how our experiences can shape our understanding of the divine and deepen our relationship with God. Perhaps the most powerful lesson from Hagar's story is the reminder that no one is beyond the reach of God's love and grace. Her journey from slavery to freedom, from despair to hope, is a testament to the transformative power of faith. By remembering Hagar, we can open our hearts to those who are suffering and become instruments of compassion in a world that so desperately needs it. Her story has something to teach us all.